On today's episode of Locked On Mets, we are looking ahead at the 2023 season, and we're going to predict which Mets could take home hardware this year. Who's got a better chance at the Cy Young? Justin Verlander or Max Scherzer? Pete Alonso, is he the best bet to win the MVP, or does Francisco Lindor take that crown? Moving over to Rookie of the Year, is it Brett Beatty? Is it Francisco Alvarez? Or is it a certain rookie that we're not even thinking about? Kodai Senga. We are going to dive into all of that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, let's kick things off with the award the Mets have had the most success with across their history, and that is Cy Young. You look at Rookie of the Years, there have been some. MVP's non-existent. Mets have never had a regular season MVP. Cy Young, though, a franchise built on pitching. You had Seaver, you had Dwight Gooden, you had R.A. Dickey, remember that one? And then, of course, you had Jacob deGrom, which is why I decided to break out the back-to-back Cy Young shirt. Figured, I have to still wear it sometimes. I still love me some Jacob deGrom, even though he's in Texas. So today was the day to do it. But his replacement, Justin Verlander, is he the best bet on the Mets to win a Cy Young this year? I actually, in spirit of honesty, had a segment of this show recorded, and I decided to scrap it and start from the top because I didn't like the argument I was trying to make. I was trying to find something in the stats. I was on their Fangraphs page. I was trying to find, where is the difference here? I actually looked at expected fielding independent pitching, identical from these two pitchers, 3.23. Yes, Verlander was better last year. Won a Cy Young, 1.75 ERA, pitched 175 innings. Scherzer had that low ERA, sub 2.5. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know exactly how low it was. 2.3 something. 2.37, I think, off the top of my head. But he made 23 starts instead of the 28 that Verlander made. Pitched 140 some odd innings. So, obviously we know he's coming out the better year, but both of these guys have won 3 Cy Youngs in the past. Ultimately, though, the guy I would bet on to win the Cy Young of the two is none other than Max Scherzer. And here's my argument for Scherzer. I look at where these guys are at in their career, and obviously both of them are in the latter stages. They're, in my opinion, both first ballot Hall of Famers. There's not really much more they have to add. They have World Series rings, but they're competitors, and there's fire there from both of them to continue to succeed. Justin Verlander is the modern day Nolan Ryan. He wants to pitch deep into his 40s. I'm sure Scherzer has some desire to pitch into his 40s as well. They are hoping to continue to be top 5, if not top 10 pitchers in baseball. We get all of that. But the difference to me, Justin Verlander, while still the consummate professional, I'm sure he's going to be great this year. He's coming off a World Series ring and a Cy Young. Max Scherzer is now a couple years removed from that World Series in 2019. I believe he's even further removed from that from a Cy Young because deGrom won 18-19. Bauer won the fake one in 20, Burns 21, Sandy Alcantara this year. So I'm thinking the last time was at 16 and 17 that Scherzer went back-to-back Cys with the Nationals. It might have been in that or 15 or 16. Don't quote me on that, but he does have 3 on his resume. 1 from the days in Detroit, 2 from Washington. But those days are a little bit in the rear view now. I think there's motivation, not necessarily just to win a Cy Young, but to win a World Series. I also think that there is a psychological exercise that Scherzer is going to have to be going through to once again be teammates with Justin Verlander. Apparently, they've worked out together in Jupiter for some time. I'm sure they are, very, well acquainted with one another, and getting along is not going to be an issue whatsoever. But there is something to be said about the competitive fire of these guys and what that looks like. And if you go back to the days in Detroit, even as a Cy Young, Max Scherzer was never the alpha. If you want to say there was two alphas, whatever, but we always know there's always an alpha's alpha, right? And Scherzer, since he left Detroit, he has been that. He has been that bulldog alpha every year in Washington and last year with the Mets. I mean, you compare him and Jacob deGrom, and they still, even though deGrom is the most excellent pitcher when healthy, who got game one? Max Scherzer. Who's going to get game one of the playoffs this year? Maybe Scherzer or Verlander. It could be a 162-game marathon of a competition to try to figure that out. And each of these guys, I spoke about this before, they are right within each other when it comes to career strikeouts. So that could be a fun race all year long as every start the other one makes, the other guy's going to jump ahead on the all-time list. That's going to be something to watch. But I think that Max Scherzer is just going to have that little extra oomph in him. Because, again, further from the team success and the personal success, but also, I'd be surprised if Max Scherzer didn't want to assert his dominance as the ace of the Mets, a team that has two aces. Yes, they're teammates. Yes, they're happy. You would be fooling yourself if you don't think that the person that Scherzer is competing with the most this year, outside of the man in the mirror, is the guy with the locker next to him in Justin Verlander. These guys are going to bring the best out of each other because they are freaking competitive as hell, and they now have to watch what the other one does on a day in and day out basis and be like, oh, wow, Justin's got a 1.6 ERA and mine's 2.0. I better put up a bunch of zeros to get in line with him. Oh, wow, Scherzer's 20 strikeouts ahead of me this year. It's time to start piling them up. I really think that inner competition is going to breed the best out of these guys. And, if you have two viable Cy Young candidates heading into opening day, you're feeling great about your rotation. There's a lot of good pitchers in baseball. We just did the rankings. We're going through the process of ranking every position, 1 through 10, or when it came to pitchers, we had to do 1 through 30 over at Just Baseball. The amount of pitching talent in the game right now is insane. I mean, there's guys that are coming in at 30 that in years past would have been a top 10 pitcher in baseball, and there's guys that are 20 that if I wanted to, I could make an argument for them being a top 5 pitcher. Now, Verlander and Scherzer are both high up on that list, but above them, you got Sandy Alcantara. You might even have Corbin Burns, both in the National League. So the competition to win that award is going to be steep. I still like Verlander and Scherzer in that mix, but Scherzer slightly more. Now, MVP is a whole nother conversation because unlike Cy Young, where there's a rich history in the Mets organization of winning it, no one's ever won the MVP as a Met. Could this year be the year? I will give you who I think is the best bet on the Mets to win an MVP. Before we get to that, though, speaking of bets, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, they've got it all at BetOnline.net. You love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline's always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Look out for MLB Futures Week. You can bet on the Cy Young, the MVP, the Rookie of the Year. Also, the NFL playoffs are happening, so head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now let us transition into MVP talk. Do the Mets have a most valuable player on their roster this upcoming season? I'm not so sure if they do, but the two guys that have a shot, Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso. I can't see, as much as I love Jeff McNeil, he's never going to get MVP recognition, and I don't think he'll ever play at that type of a level. Brandon Nimmo, come on, I just don't see it. Starling Marte, Marcana, nope. You go around the diamond. There's really not anyone else. There's two premier stars on this roster. It's Alonso and Lindor. Now, Francisco Lindor is the advanced metric darling to win an MVP because, he's going to be atop the Fangraphs wins above replacement leaderboard, 6.8 F4 this year. That is impressive. If you have anything over 6, it's a remarkable campaign. I could see him having an 8-win season again. He did that, I think it was like 7-8 or something like that. If I'm not, maybe he did actually cross over at 8. 2018 with the then Indians, now Guardians. He had a really, really solid year where it was, I got to find this, but, he's going to rack up the F4 because he has the glove. And now I think the glove plays up more without the shift, where I feel like Francisco Lindor kind of separates himself from other defenders a bit more, and maybe that will help him not only when it comes to MVP potentially, but winning a Gold Glove. I think that is something that, votes have really eluded in the last couple of years, and I don't really get why. That could be something that changes with the, ridding of the shift if his range starts to show more. But when it comes to the F4, I was looking for 2018, 7.8 for Lindor that year. So if he were to have an 8-win season, that's where I could start to see it. Here's the thing. Lindor can be prone to slumps, and he can have hot stretches where he can carry you. I want to see a consistent year, and I think the benchmarks that he has to hit to be an MVP, it's 30 home runs. That's a big one. It's an F4 over 8. That's big. And then it's like 120 RBIs. He's got to have some of these counting stats, and there's every chance he can do it. I think it's hard to believe that he would be the best hitter on the Mets because I think Alonso has that, and that's where a award that might as well be best offensive player, that's where you could skew Alonso here. I think that Francisco Lindor is the most valuable player on the Mets, and yet if I really had to put my money somewhere, I think I'd probably have to park it on Alonso because Pete Alonso has the power to hit as many home runs as you can imagine. We just saw Judge get up to, 62 in the right season. If Major League Baseball feeds him the right balls, but really though, in the right season, like Alonso could have that in the tank, or at least another 50 home run campaign. And let's just say Pete Alonso goes out this year and he hits 51 home runs. If he's got Francisco Lindor getting on base for him, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Jeff McNeil, all these guys that are, putting traffic on the bases in front of him. Even if, imagine a scenario where the Mets lineup gets so long that Brett Beatty is DHing or playing third and batting ninth. I mean, there could be so many potential RBI situations. We watched Alonso clean up on that last year. He led the league, 131. I think we could see an even bigger season from him. I think we could see more home runs, more RBIs. And if he were to go out, and let's just say, for a season, he actually gets that batting average. I don't know if he could get it to 300. That's a lot to ask from Pete Alonso. But if he keeps that thing, well over 280, even into the 290s, at the on-base percentage is high, 360s, 370s. It would be a season where his WRC plus would go through the roof. And I think there's writers that are starting to look at that. You look at where Goldschmidt and Judge both won the MVP awards, and look at where their WRC plus was, you can kind of get an indication of how that stat is starting to be valued. Goldschmidt was also just carrying a team all season long, home runs, RBIs, hot stretches where you really garner attention. Pete can be that guy. Pete has that star power and overall power to really kind of make some waves. So if the Mets are a runaway first place team in the National League East, if Alonso hits the 50 home runs, if he drives in 140, puts up ridiculous video game stats, I could see him winning the MVP. But I also look at the league at large, and you still have Machado, you still have Goldschmidt, you still have Freeman over with the Dodgers. That's a possibility. Trey Turner going to have a lot of eyeballs on him moving back over to the East Coast with the East Coast bias, playing for a market like Philly that can be rabid and filling the shoes of an injured Bryce Harper as the team's leader early on. That's a candidate. JT Realmuto for the same team, another candidate. You got, Bogarts now in the mix, although I don't think he's really MVP caliber. But as we already said, Machado's on that team. Tatis, really, if he could have an unbelievable comeback season, I don't think he'd be MVP this year, but he's certainly a guy that will contend in the future. Juan Soto's on that team too. That's insane. There's a lot of talent in the National League right now. So of the award races we're looking at today, MVP is the one I'm least confident in. It's the one that I probably wouldn't put any money down on if I was to bet on this. But if we had to look at one guy in the Mets that could win it this year, I think it's Pete Alonso. But I wouldn't be completely stunned if Lindor was able to garner more votes, because when it comes to F4 and overall impact, he should be the guy. Now, the last award is one that the Mets have kind of a sneaky favorite to win it, and that's Rookie of the Year. We're going to discuss that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Rookie of the Year conversation. Who do the Mets have that could factor strongly in that mix? Well, it's the prospects, right? We could go through them. I think Brett Baty, sneaky dark horse, could get a lot of playing time. I think he has a really great shot to be the starting third baseman by June at the latest. I just feel like he is going to be that guy sooner rather than later. Francisco Alvarez is out here saying he's going to be on the opening day roster, even though I don't necessarily believe that, but the potential to have a catcher that, if he gets enough playing time, can leave the yard 30 times and drive in a bunch of runs. He could be such a huge X factor. He's a Rookie of the Year candidate. If you want to get crazy and say Mark Vientos is as well, by all means, if he was able to get the requisite at-bats, I could see it. But there's one guy that stands out that I would bet on if I had to from this Mets team. It's Kodai Senga. Kodai Senga, we forget he's a rookie because, what is he, in his late 20s, 29, something like that, 28, 29? But the guy has a whole career behind him now from the NPB in Japan, where he has been winning awards, winning championships, an ace. If he translates and hits the ceiling that is so lofty for him, if that ghost fork is unhittable, and he still is able to touch 101, which he has in the NPB, I think that's probably a little bit steep, but let's just say he can touch 99 and he can live at 96 with that devastating ghost fork, with a slider. If he picks up some knowledge from the future Hall of Famers that we mentioned earlier on in the show, Kodai Senga becomes the best number 3 in baseball, pitches to a sub-3 ERA, and is taking the ball every 5 or 6 days, depending on the Mets want to slot their rotation, protecting him, obviously. And he's out there for 25 plus starts of that type of production. Man, it's going to be hard to deny him of the Rookie of the Year because he's eligible. It's almost like the NBA where Ben Simmons misses a season and then he gets to come back and try to win a Rookie of the Year. It almost feels like Senga shouldn't be in the running because he's far from a rookie when it comes to baseball experience. But in Major League Baseball, technically a rookie, he's the guy I'd look at. For focusing more on the prospect angle, I'd say Baty over Alvarez because I just think the playing time's going to be there. And I think he's more ready. I really do. I think the bat is on par. And then you also have just the easier task defensively, and one that I think Baty's up for, where Alvarez, even though he said his defense is ready to go, I still think the Mets don't want to give him that seasoning, and that will maybe keep him out of the mix because he might just debut a little bit too late to get into it, particularly when you have other guys like a Baty potentially, of course Kodai Senga, and others around the league, Corbin Carroll, guys that even debuted last year, like Alvarez and Baty, but maybe even had a little bit bigger sample, but are still considered rookies. There's a lot of talent that could win that award, but Kodai Senga, sneaky great pick here to take it home. Anyway, though, as far as the main awards, that's what we got. I guess we'll rattle through Gold Gloves, Silver Sluggers. I mean, Alonso, Lindor, McNeil, all Silver Slugger candidates. On the perfect season, maybe a Nimmo, but I just don't quite buy that one. Other than that, I just don't see another Silver Slugger on this roster. You go to Gold Gloves, Lindor should have won it really in 2021 more than 2022, and he kind of got snubbed. I don't know why voters aren't respecting him, that he hasn't even been a finalist, but I predict that this is final year he wins a Gold Glove as a Met because I think the separator with the lack of the shift is just going to make it so clear that he's the best shortstop in baseball, that he'll take home that award. McNeil's got a shot at a Gold Glove at second base if he plays the position enough. Brandon Nimmo got an outside shot at a center field Gold Glove. At least being nominated as a finalist, we could see it. Will Guillorme get some damn respect for the utility Gold Glove this year? I hope so. Will Tomas Nido get enough playing time to be figured into the mix behind the plate as a Gold Glove winning catcher? I think that's even a possibility. Outside one, but certainly, when it comes to who are the best defenders on this team, Nido's name deserves mention. Looking at all of it, I think the Mets, again, have a pretty good chance at winning some hardware. I think, Silver Sluggers, Gold Glovers, they can be, a constant around this roster. If you really look at it, there's a lot of guys that can factor in. Starling Marte in right field, I should have mentioned as well. But the big awards, I think Kodai Senga, probably. Rookie of the Year is the best one to look at. And then maybe Scherzer or Verlander for the Cy Young. Anyway, though, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. Follow the show, @Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by Lindsey Crosby. Locked On MLB Prospects is where you want to go to learn about the stars of tomorrow. You can follow Locked On MLB Prospects on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.